What if I told you that according to one Christian doctrine, God knew exactly what you'd have for breakfast this morning before the universe even existed? But here's the twist, you still chose it freely. This isn't science fiction. It's Molinism, and it's one of the most mind-bending theological concepts ever conceived. Picture this scenario. You're standing at a coffee shop, debating between a latte and cappuccino. You freely choose the latte. But according to Molinism, God knew you'd make that exact choice in that exact situation billions of years before you were born. Yet somehow, your choice was still genuinely free. Sound impossible? That's exactly what a 16th-century Jesuit priest named Luis de Molina tried to prove. Luis de Molina lived during one of Christianity's most heated theological battles. On one side, Calvinists argued that God predetermined everything, including who gets saved. Humans had no real choice. On the other side, Arminians insisted humans had genuine free will, but this seemed to limit God's sovereignty. Molina thought both sides were wrong. He believed he'd found a third way that preserved both divine control and human freedom. Here's where Molinism gets fascinating. Molina proposed that God has three types of knowledge. First, natural knowledge. God knows all possibilities. Every potential scenario that could ever exist. Second, free knowledge. God knows what will actually happen based on his decrees. But here's the game changer, middle knowledge. God knows what every free creature would choose in every possible circumstance. Let's break down middle knowledge with an example. Imagine God is considering creating a world where you meet your future spouse at a bookstore on Tuesday. Through middle knowledge, God knows that if he creates this scenario, you'll freely choose to start a conversation. You won't be forced to speak. You'll genuinely want to. But God knew this would be your free choice before he even created that possibility. This creates what Molinists call counterfactuals of freedom. These are statements about what someone would freely do in hypothetical situations. If Sarah were offered that job in Tokyo, she would accept it. If David faced that moral dilemma, he would choose honesty. God knows all these counterfactuals perfectly. He can then create circumstances knowing exactly how people will freely respond. But critics have fired back with devastating objections. The most famous is called the grounding problem. If these counterfactuals are true before you make any actual choices, what makes them true? Your future free actions can't ground past truths about what you would do. It seems circular. Some philosophers argue this makes middle knowledge logically impossible. The differences between theological systems become stark here. Calvinists say God simply predestined everything, so there's no mystery about his knowledge. Arminians argue God knows the future through his perfect foreknowledge of actual choices. But Molinists insist God strategically creates circumstances knowing how free creatures will respond, making him the ultimate chess master playing with willing pieces. The practical implications are staggering. If Molinism is true, prayer makes perfect sense. God can answer your prayers by creating circumstances where people freely choose to help you. Missions work is meaningful because God places missionaries where he knows hearts are prepared to respond. Evil and suffering exist because even God can't create a world with free creatures that has no possibility of wrong choices. Today, Molinism attracts both brilliant defenders and fierce critics. Philosophers like William Lane Craig champion it as the best solution to age-old problems of divine sovereignty and human freedom. Others, like Paul Helm, argue it's philosophically incoherent. The debate rages in seminary classrooms, philosophy conferences, and online forums where everyday believers wrestle with these ultimate questions. What does this mean for you personally? If Molinism is correct, every decision you make is genuinely free, yet perfectly known by God. Your choices matter enormously because they're truly yours. Yet you can trust that God sovereignly orchestrates circumstances for his purposes. You're neither a puppet nor abandoned to pure chance. You're a free agent in God's perfectly planned story. Whether you find Molinism convincing or problematic, it represents one of humanity's most sophisticated attempts to preserve both divine sovereignty and human freedom. In a world where we often feel caught between fate and chaos, Molinism offers a third option: we're free agents in a story whose author knows every possible plot twist. The question remains, is this philosophical masterpiece or logical impossibility? The theological jury is still out.